everything's changed. You know, obviously, there's been so much change in entertainment and in just the sociology and the demographics of the U.S. And now I know that after the documentary, you know, the problem with Apu, about the convenience store character that you used to voice, you said, I'm not going to voice that character anymore, and I'm not going to voice other characters that you've been with for decades that aren't my ethnicity. Walk me through that decision, and if you miss them.
Well, you know, I did all those characters with love and to the best of my ability. And as you said, they were created in a time where we didn't think twice about providing voices like that, or caricaturing or parodying different ethnicities. And that's part of, that turned out to be part of the problem is we didn't consider it. We didn't consider the ramifications it might have. And in some ways, those consequences weren't clear for 10, 20, 30 years later. And with, you know, people who grew up, Indian people who grew up with the character of Apu in this country and could honestly report about what that was like for them. And, you know, it wasn't a quick decision for me. It wasn't like I heard the documentary or saw it or heard it was coming out and then went, all right, that's it, I'm not doing this character anymore. It sent me on a journey of discovery, which I encourage every person in this country to take, certainly every white person in this country to go on. And I know there's a lot of talk about it now, and there's a lot of backlash about, oh, it's not okay to be white, and it's not about that. It's about acknowledging, for most people, it's just blind spots. It's just not considering what the consequences might be, the effect it might have had on people of color. Whether they're Indian or Latin or Black or whatever part of this culture, and really considering the effect that it may have had, that took me a while. You know, I didn't want to. On the one hand, I didn't want to knee-jerk respond to criticism and just stop doing a voice, because that's what it came down to for me: is do I stop doing this voice or not? Which took really a few years for me to sort out. I didn't want to knee-jerk stop, because people, like the joke I make, but it's kind of true, is this like 17 hipsters in a microbrewery in Brooklyn deciding who should say what and when, or is this like a real harm that was done to Indian people in this country? And I eventually came out on, there's a lot of gray area, but eventually I came out on the side of, actually there was some harm done. And with the best of intentions, no matter how funny it was and how much love I tried to put into it. So it seemed the right thing to do, not to mention, let's leave room for people of color to voice themselves. You know, the irony is not lost on me that part of the problem of unintended or institutionalized or implicit bias or racism in this country is you literally are taking the voice away from certain people. So let's let them quite literally have their voice back. I mean, why shouldn't an Indian fellow voice Apu? And now it's not only the voice. There's other factors to keep in mind. There's the characterization and how much is a stereotype, and you know, and this and that, and that matters as well. But some of my other characters in the show, even though they weren't so over the top or weren't stereotypical, let's let people of color voice themselves. As a white person in Hollywood, I have plenty of opportunity. There's no dearth of it for me. You know, on the show, right? I have literally dozens of other characters that are not problematic for me to voice. So let's let people quite literally speak for themselves. I know I'm going off, but I want to make one other point.
No, but listen, I want you to go off, and I'll tell you why, Hank, because they're in this new sort of cancel culture, we don't hear a lot of people as articulate as you just were about your decision making. And we do hear a lot of knee-jerk decisions, and then we hear a lot of complaints about that. And I think it's all about the conversation, isn't it? So I'm really glad that you are saying what you're saying. And I want you to continue.
look, any extreme, I think, can go too far, right? Any extreme is extreme. So does on both sides of the political aisle, the social aisle, right? Stuff can go too far, and especially in this clickbait headline world we live in, where people make decisions based on not even the article about the thing, but just the headline of the article that you see on your news feed, right?
Yeah.
Or the comments in social media, and everybody's off to the races. But one of the things I hear a lot about, well, look, it's just acting, right? It's just portraying characters. Simpsons makes fun of everybody. And what's the difference between doing a Luigi in Italian accent or doing an Irish accent, which I don't do particularly well, but I've done it many times in The Simpsons, and other things. And I totally understand that point of view. I bristled a lot. I was very defensive when I first heard this criticism about Apu and some other characters. And I understand it, but upon examination, what I came to was, and I learned was, here's the example I give. I worked with a comedian a long time ago. I'm a Jewish American guy. And worked with a comedian, very, very funny comedian, waspy guy, who would do a Jewish voice as a joke. You daily talk like this. Why are you getting upset? What are you doing? Come on. And now, did it bother me? No. But then the character of Apu was really the only representation of Indian people in American culture, really the only one in pop culture, for about 20 solid years. I started to think, what if this voice here was the only representation of Jewish people in American culture? And it wasn't even me, a Jewish guy, doing it. It was, some waspy guy's impression of it. I would maybe not love that so much. And on top of that, I'm a white guy, right? So if this is how you think a Jewish person sounds, okay. But I don't walk into a grocery store or walk into a bank or go to get a loan or go anywhere in public and people take a look at me and go, oh, look at the Jewish guy. He must sound like this, or his father sounds like this. No, I don't, not necessarily. I can escape that because as a white person, I can assimilate, I can blend. But Indian people in this culture can't do that. They're immediately identified as Indian. And they would hear it. Are you Apu? Does your father sound like Apu? Do you work at a 7-Eleven? And it's maybe not the most earth-shattering issue in society, but it is a window into quite a serious one of implicit bias and the ideas we form about people and the pigeonholes and we put them into and how we marginalize them based on messages we're getting from the media, from the news, from Hollywood. I could even go on longer about this, Ashleigh. But anyway, that's what I came to, and that's why I decided.
I think you hit it. I think you hit the sweet spot. I think you explained this very, very articulately, like I said, and that's what's missing right now is people being able to actually speak and be heard. I think on both sides.